I have been sitting with this for 5 months. 5 months of watching the news, of checking the notebook on my kitchen table every morning before school, of wondering when or if I would ever be allowed to say what I know. The sign I was told to wait for came on March 2nd. The blood moon rose over Portland, and I stood on my apartment roof and watched it climb. Red, unmistakable, moving the way he told me something would move in the sky. I called my sister Rachel before it had even fully risen. She picked up on the first ring. She already knew why I was calling. That was 30 days ago. The war that Jesus described to me when I was dead, the specific conflict, the sequence, the nations involved, is unfolding right now. And for the first time since October 2025, I am going to tell you everything. Not just the first 3 things he showed me, all 4. My name is Chloe Marie. I am 34 years old. I teach art to 8-year-olds at an elementary school in Portland, Oregon. I am not a prophet. I am not a pastor. I don't stand at a pulpit on Sundays. I pray quietly in my own way, and I've always been a little suspicious of organized religion. Not hostile, just careful. The kind of person who believes in God but keeps that belief tucked close, not worn on the outside. I want you to understand what I am before I tell you what happened to me, because the only reason any of this matters is if you understand how ordinary I was. I grew up here in the Pacific Northwest. My parents were believers but not strict. I went to church on Easter and Christmas, prayed before bed as a child, let the habit drift as I got older. By my late 20s, I had what I would call a faith that functioned more like a background hum. Present, not absent, but not close. I chose to teach art because I loved watching kids discover that they could create something from nothing. That small miracle, a child looking at a blank page and deciding to fill it, never got old for me. I had no visions, no spiritual experiences beyond what any praying person occasionally feels. A sense of being heard, a feeling of peace that surprises you. Nothing that would have prepared me for October. It was the 11th, a Saturday night in early autumn. I had been grading work, small watercolors my 3rd graders had done of things they loved. I stepped out near my apartment building around 9 p.m. to get some air. The details of what happened next came out in the police report. Someone grabbed me from behind near the parking structure, blunt force trauma to the back of the head. They found my phone on the ground. My wallet was still on me, so it ended before it fully began. I don't know why. I was unconscious before I could understand what was happening. Rachel called me 15 minutes after it occurred. She's 3 years younger than me, a registered nurse. She works cardiac care at the same hospital where I was taken. When I didn't answer, she called again. Then she drove. She found me before the ambulance did. At OHSU, Oregon Health and Science University, the team declared me clinically dead at 11:47 p.m. 11 minutes. Rachel told me later, in the way that only a nurse can deliver information she knows is devastating, that 11 minutes without circulation means they don't expect what they call meaningful neurological recovery. She stood in that hallway knowing exactly what 11 minutes meant. She told me she prayed harder than she had ever prayed for anything. I was not in that hallway. What I can tell you is this: leaving my body was not what I expected. There was no tunnel, no rushing upward. One moment, there was pain and confusion and the hard pavement, and then, differently, there was knowing. Not darkness, not light. Something that was both absent and full simultaneously, in a way that makes no sense in language, and made perfect sense in that place. I was not alone. The presence arrived the way you recognize a person before you see their face. A weight, a quality, something that precedes description. I did not see him the way I see you or the way I see the walls of my classroom, but I knew, instantly and completely and without any doubt, in the deepest part of whatever I was in that moment, I knew I was with Jesus. Not a concept of him, not a symbol. Him. The knowing was so total, it bypassed every question I might have formed. There was nothing to ask. There was only recognition. The love that came from that presence, I have tried for 5 months to describe it, and I cannot. I can only say that every experience of love I have ever had in my life, put together, entire, stacked, that would not equal a fraction of what I felt in that space. It was not soft. It was enormous. It was the most real thing I have ever encountered. He communicated with me. It bypassed spoken language entirely, arriving in me as pure certainty rather than sound. And what I received was this. There were 4 things coming in 2026. He was going to show them to me, and I was going to be sent back, and I was going to carry what I had been shown. The first thing he showed me was a lived certainty, something I experienced as if I had already passed through it rather than a vision I merely watched. A hidden truth involving children, a global revelation. Something that had been concealed on a scale most people could not imagine would be exposed, pulled into the light in a way that could not be contained or managed. He showed me the anger that would follow. And I want to say this carefully, the anger was not wrong. It was grief. It was the response of a world confronted with something that should never have happened. The exposure would come in 2026, and when it did, the anger would be unlike anything this generation had seen before. I thought of my classroom the moment he showed me this. I thought of my 8-year-olds with their watercolors. I understood, without being told, why this was the first thing. The second thing was in the sky. He showed me something red, burning, and moving in a way that defied explanation. It traced a path completely differently from anything I know. And the response to it would be significant. Human attention shifting upward. There would be fear before there would be understanding. He showed me that this was not cause for terror, but that it would precede a period in which many people who had stopped looking up would begin to again. The third thing was the sun. I cannot fully explain what he showed me, except that the sun would behave in a way that existing frameworks, meteorological or otherwise, would not fully account for. He showed me that this would be a moment when even people who had explained away everything else would stop. They would pause out of pure recognition, sensing a profound shift. He told me that the sky would speak in 2026 more than once. Then he showed me the fourth thing, and then he told me to wait. I cannot fully communicate what it is to be given information and then told to hold it. The fourth thing he showed me was specific. It was a war. He described nations, sequence, escalation. He showed me a conflict that would involve fire from multiple directions and a particular region of the world. And he told me details that I wrote down the night I came home from the hospital. Details that had no context for me then, that sounded like words I understood individually but had no picture to attach to. But he told me, there will be a sign in the sky. It will be unmistakable. When it comes, you will know it is time. I came back to my body all at once. It was not gradual. It was instantaneous. From that boundless, luminous space to the harsh fluorescent light of the OHSU trauma unit. Rachel's face above me, her hand on mine, crying in a way I'd never seen her cry before. She said later that when the monitors changed, she knew before any alarm sounded. The first coherent thing I said to her was, get a notebook. She found one in her bag, one of those small composition notebooks she always carries for patient notes. I told her everything I had been shown, and she wrote it down, and I read it back, and she rewrote anything she had gotten wrong. The 4 prophecies. October 11th, 2025. Her handwriting and mine on the same page. She said, do you want me to tell anyone? I said, keep the 4th one sealed. It's too soon. She simply nodded. Rachel has always had an intuitive grasp of when to push and when to wait. The weeks that followed were stranger in some ways than the NDE itself. Physical recovery took time. Headaches, light sensitivity, fatigue. But the weight I carried was not physical. It was the weight of knowing and waiting. I returned to my classroom 6 weeks after the attack. My students made get-well cards with crayons and glitter and things that don't always go together in ways that make sense, which is the most honest art there is. I stood in front of them on my first day back and felt something I could not name. Purpose without pressure. Like I was exactly where I was supposed to be, doing exactly what I was supposed to be doing, until the moment came for something else. November passed. December, the first 3 prophecies I spoke about carefully. To Rachel, to a few trusted people in my life. Not publicly. The 4th I kept entirely sealed. I watched the news the way someone watches for weather, not for events. January 2026. Tensions between the US, Israel, and Iran escalated sharply. Joint military exercises in the Eastern Mediterranean. Diplomatic communications broke down in ways that analysts called unprecedented. I pulled out the notebook and read the fourth prophecy and then put it back. February. Israeli and American joint operations began targeting Iranian nuclear infrastructure. The Strait of Hormuz entered the conversation in a way it had not since 2019. Lebanon was watching its border with the intensity of a place that has learned what watching means. Global markets registered fear in the way markets register what humans have not yet said out loud. I read the notebook again. I called Rachel. I said, "It's starting." She said, "I know." Then March 2nd came. I had set no alarm, but I woke at 2 a.m. and walked to the window, and the sky was already doing what he had told me the sky would do. The total lunar eclipse. The blood moon, red and burning, hanging there with that particular quality of something that demands you stop and look. That was the moment I went up to the roof, the moment I called Rachel in the early hours of the morning, when we both finally realized the waiting was over. I came back inside. I sat at my kitchen table with the notebook open to the fourth prophecy, and for the first time since October, I read it not as something I was holding for later, but as something I was about to release. The Iran-Israel-US conflict has escalated in the 30 days since the blood moon, in ways that align with what was shown to me in specific terms. I want to be careful here because what I'm about to do is something I do not do lightly. I am going to tell you what Jesus told me about this war. Word for word, the way it was written in that notebook on the night I came home from the hospital. This is not my interpretation. This is what I received. Here is the fourth thing he showed me. He said, "The conflict that begins with the Triangle of Nations, the ancient land, its protector across the water, and the nation whose name means the land of Aryans, will not end at the borders of those three. It will expand in the direction of the rising sun. The strait will close. Not for days, for a season. And in that closing, the world will understand for the first time in a generation what it means when the flow of things stops. The nations who believe themselves far from this will discover they are not far at all." He showed me fire in the air, a relentless sequence of strikes. He showed me a night in which the exchanges happened so rapidly that by morning, the shape of things had permanently changed. Rather than a final casualty count, he revealed grief at a scale that moved through countries the way grief moves, silently, then all at once. And then he told me what had not yet happened. He said, "Before the strait closes, there will be an attempt at mediation by a nation that has not yet been mentioned publicly in connection with this conflict. This nation will come forward and it will not succeed, but its presence in the negotiation will be significant. It will be the last moment before the closing. When you see that nation step forward, you will know the next phase has begun." He told me the closing of the strait would be the turning point. He told me that everything after that point would move toward resolution, but that the resolution would not look like peace. It would look like exhaustion. Nations would stop, not because they had agreed, but because they had reached the limit of what continued engagement would cost them. And this is what he attached to all of it. This is the message he gave me for anyone who would hear this. The war is not punishment. The war is a signal. He told me that the events of 2026, the children's truth being exposed, the sky speaking, the conflict, were not the end of something. They were the beginning of a question that the world would be forced to ask. He told me that the people who would understand why these things are happening are the ones who have already chosen to look. They won't view this through a political lens or sort events into winners and losers, but instead will ask themselves, what is this asking of me? He gave me one instruction for anyone who hears this. He said, choose your attention deliberately. In the coming months, there will be more information arriving faster than any human mind was designed to process. The people who will move through this season with their hearts intact are the ones who decide what they are looking for before the noise begins. He said, decide today what matters to you most. Make it a concrete reality. Then protect your attention like it is the most valuable thing you have, because in what is coming, it will be. I have spent the last 5 months thinking about why I was sent back. I am not famous. I have no platform. I am a school teacher who was attacked in a parking structure and spent 11 minutes somewhere that changed everything she understood about existence. When I stand in front of my third graders and watch them paint, I know exactly why I was returned to this room. My purpose isn't to gain a following or force people to believe me. I am simply here to say what I was given to say, to whoever was meant to hear it at exactly the right moment. That moment is now. I have been afraid. I want to say that clearly. I have been afraid that no one would believe me, afraid that sharing this would invite ridicule, afraid that speaking the fourth prophecy would make me look like exactly the kind of person I am not. But fear is not the same thing as doubt. I have never doubted what I was shown. What I experienced in that space between dying and returning was the most real thing that has ever happened to me. More real than this room. More real than my hands on this notebook. Rachel, who held my hand when I came back, who wrote down the words I gave her before I had fully returned to my own body, who watched the blood moon rise and answered my call before the first ring finished. Rachel told me something when I first described the fourth prophecy to her. She said, "Write it exactly, don't soften it, don't interpret it, just say what you were told." I have tried to do that. Whatever comes next in this world, whatever the strait brings, whatever nation steps forward into that brief window of mediation, whatever shape the exhaustion of 2026 takes, I am not afraid. I stood in that luminous, boundless space with a presence that contains more love than this world has language for. And I was told that I mattered, and you matter, and none of what is unfolding is beyond what has already been seen and known and held. The notebook is still on my kitchen table. The blood moon has come and gone. 30 days have passed. If you were meant to hear this, you found it at exactly the right time. And if this has stirred something in you, something you can't quite name but that feels important, I want you to stay close. Subscribe so you're here when the next piece of what I was shown comes into view. Because I was not told only 4 things. I was told that I would understand more as the season unfolded. And the season is only beginning.